Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Best. I'm here to present the second in our webinar series on behalf of the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council on how to use pulse ingredients as egg and dairy ingredient alternatives in food product development. This follows our previous webinar on using pulse-based ingredients in gluten-free and allergen-averse product development. So I would like to thank all of you for joining us in this webinar. First of all, I'd like to just introduce myself very briefly. I'm the president of Best Vantage Incorporated. We're a consulting firm that exists to help companies introduce new technologies and processes into the food, beverage, and nutritional products industries. We've been working with the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council on this project. Joined here with by my associate Joanne Colbert. Joanne Colbert handles a lot of marketing and business development and project management activities in our firm. I'm especially pleased to be here because I actually began my career working in a wholesale bakery supply company where we did work on egg alternatives. That was quite a few years ago, so it shows the enduring attraction of this area of development. We are unfortunately not able to include Allie McDaniel, the food marketing manager for the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council, because she is currently en route in the air and will not be able to join us until just after the webinar. Just a few housekeeping items. If you are disconnected, you can always rejoin us by clicking on the original email link that was sent to you. You can pose questions during the webinar, and Joanne will help coordinate all those questions so that we can answer them at the end of the webinar. After the webinar, you can always email questions to Allie McDaniel. We will, during the course of this webinar, present her email information, so please note it down. She is always willing to entertain questions about pulses and pulse ingredients. Soon after the webinar, we will post this so that you can access it at the website of the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council. We'll provide that information as well. There's going to be a lot of information presented here, so please don't feel overwhelmed and with the need to write as fast as you can because, as I mentioned, this information will be made readily available. And then finally, because we always try to improve upon our program and on our presentation skills, immediately after the webinar, you should receive a short survey. Please do fill it out. That information is very important to us and helps us improve on the quality of the presentations that we bring to you. So, welcome all of you. I think we'll start with the uh, program right now. I'd like to start with a note that the funds for this project were provided through the Idaho State Department of Agriculture Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. And we do owe them a special thanks for making this program possible. Taking you through pulses from the time of planting to the time of growth and harvest, this is what they look like basically. Um, Pulses are legumes. Uh, and they have been the focus of a great part of great area of new development in our industry. We'd like to start this presentation by giving you a brief overview of what pulses and pulse-based ingredients are. We'd like to then talk about the role of it and dairy ingredients in food product development. We'd like to proceed on to the use of pulse ingredients as egg and dairy alternatives, and then finally get into some formulation details on how to use pulse ingredients as egg and dairy alternatives and extenders in food formulations before we conclude and address any questions that you may have. Again, I'd like to remind you that after the webinar, you can always send questions to Allie McDaniel at the email address that is presented below. So, starting section one, looking at pulses and pulse-based ingredients. We'd like to talk first about definitions and nomenclature, address briefly the nutritional advantages that are provided by this ingredient category, talk about pulse production in the United States, and let's begin by talking about pulses by definition. Pulses are legumes similar to peanuts and soybeans, but they are classified separately in large part because compositionally they are different. There are 10 categories of pulses as defined by the UNFAO. Of these, only 7 are of commercial importance as foods. The others are primarily used for animal feed, and only 5 factor significantly in international food trade. Pulses are highly sustainable. This is a very popular concept right now in North America and other parts of the world. They're very highly sustainable because they help fix nitrogen in the soil, they return nitrogen to the soil, and they also demand very low inputs of both fertilizers and herbicides, or I should also add, for that matter, pesticides. They're very rich in protein, very rich in protein quality, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals. We'll get into that into some more details shortly. And they're used in many different ways in foods today. This is a very early stage category. We are spending a lot of time and effort on our part to find new ways to introduce these ingredients into foods. And I've seen some very interesting and exciting categories that are in the very early stages of development. We'll talk a bit about that as well. Also, very timely to mention that they are free of gluten and other allergens and must be declared on food package labels in the United States. So pulses that are important to human food consumption include chickpeas and garbanzo beans, also known as garbanzo beans. These are the pulses that are used in the very fast-growing category of hummus, for example. Dry beans are very well known in the American diet. There are many different forms of dry beans, red beans, navy beans, and such. Lentils, which you see appearing on the right side of your screen there. Dry peas, also known as field peas. Broad beans are also known as fava beans. Pigeon peas, and cowpeas. Cowpeas, the best known cowpeas in North America are probably black eyed peas. Pulses that are important to food formulation, we will, for the purpose of this presentation, only focus on 3 categories. They are chickpeas, also known as garbanzo beans, as I mentioned, dry peas and field peas, which are primarily available in both yellow and green form. Lentils, the most common form of lentils found in North America are red lentils, pardina lentils, and regular lentils, but there are many more. Now, pulses offer exceptional nutritional value, as this chart will show you. If we look at the 3 pulses of interest to our presentation, dry peas, regular lentils, and chickpeas, we find that they have a protein content that is somewhere between that of soy and of cereals. They're also very low in fat, similar to cereals, but they contain a very significant amount of starches and sugars, which affect their functionality. This makes them more like cereals and less like soybeans. And then when it comes to fiber, they tend to be very good sources of fiber. In addition, there are specific nutritional benefits. They have a very superior amino acid profile. They contain all the essential amino acids and complement the amino acid profiles of cereals very well, which is one reason that they're often found together in national diets. Very rich in vitamins, especially folic acid, which has been of interest of late, very high levels of minerals. They're also very low glycemic. The high levels of starch and sugars that you see there tend to be very tightly bound with the proteins, the cotyledon proteins, so they do not exhibit a high glycemic activity. They are non GMO, and we should also point out that the dietary fiber and protein contents of these pulses makes them very timely in terms of trends in the U.S. consumer market. In a recent study by the International Food Information Council, they found that in a survey of consumers that 62% of consumers looked for fiber when they were making purchase decisions about packaged food and beverage purposes. And 56% of consumers looked for protein, especially with regard to protein in the areas of fitness and such. We've seen huge increases in demand for higher protein foods. But the protein demands have also been very important in international development. Protein and fiber are very sought after ingredients. The United States is one of the premier pulse producing regions in the world. Part of this is due to the nature of its climate, part of this is due to things such as infrastructure. If we look at pulse production for the three pulses of interest, the United States in 2011 ranked ninth globally for dry peas, fifth globally for lentils, and 16th globally for chickpeas. The United States is a very major exporter of pulses around the world. But the United States also provides a superior production, manufacturing, and distribution infrastructure. That's very important in helping to keep the price of pulses down overall, but also in controlling the quality of pulses that are entered into the food supply. The United States offers multiple university and technical centers that can provide technical support and innovation. We'll talk about one in particular later on in this presentation. So, because the United States has developed very high quality grading, handling, and production control systems, U.S. pulse producers generally get a very good price for the pulses that they export around the world. Quality is one very big issue in pulses right now because we're still trying to develop some uniform standards for quality evaluation and grading in pulses. Overall, pulses are still a pretty early stage food category where there is a lot of development to be had. Now, pulses can be processed into a variety of food ingredients. A very important step I should point out in pulses, or the conversion of pulses to food ingredients, is that you have to have a step, you have to have an enzyme inactivation step. The reason for this is because, like soy, there are lipoxidase enzymes that must be inactivated, or you may get some off flavor development. But enzyme inactivated pulses are processed into flours, flakes, pastes, and then also pulse cereal blends. They can be fractionated into protein concentrates and isolates, starches, and then bran fiber components, each which offer unique functional attributes in product development. And they can be further processed into particulates, for example, crisps for use in nutrition bars and cereals. Now, getting to our next section, and I'm posting Allie McDaniel's email down below in case you didn't write it down the first time. Looking at the role of egg and dairy ingredients in food formulation, we'd like to look at briefly at functional properties, at food applications, allergenicity issues, and economics. Looking at functional ingredients, eggs break down into phospholipids and also proteins, protein concentrates, isolates, and there are enzyme modified egg proteins out there in the marketplace as well. Milk can be broken down into protein concentrates, protein isolates, and also enzyme modified proteins. With pulses, pulses currently can be broken down into pulse protein concentrates, protein isolates. There is some work being done to enzyme modify pulse proteins, but I would say this is still very early stage at this time. But in addition to the proteins, we also have starches and modified starches, which offer very important functional attributes, and also soluble and insoluble fibers that offer important functional attributes. And all of these will come into play when using pulses to as alternatives to dairy and egg ingredients. If we look at functional protein ingredients, just looking at the protein for a moment, we look at soy, milk, and whey. If we look at milk as a wet raw commodity, it contains about 3.5% protein. Whey is about 0.8%. Soy, which is a dry oil seed, of course, contains about 35% protein. When we talk about protein concentrates, we generally talk about ingredients that contain 40 to 90% protein. And if we talk about protein isolates, we're talking in excess of 90% protein. With eggs, starting with eggs as a wet ingredient, raw egg ingredient, we're talking about a product that has 10.9% protein. If we look at the yolk, we find that there's more lipid than protein. Both the lipid and the protein have very functional properties. The most important property would likely be the emulsification features of the phospholipids that are found in the yolk. And if we look at the protein content for yolk, we're talking about as a dried ingredient, 34% protein, 55.8% lipid. If we're looking at the albumin, of course, this is almost all protein. Dried albumin, egg albumin powder would be about 82.4% protein. Now, looking at functional properties of eggs that we have to be able to duplicate in using pulse ingredients, eggs provide aeration and foaming, binding and adhesion, gelation and coagulation, emulsification, humectancy, thickening, and mouthfeel for a wide variety of products, ranging from bakery products to fried, battered products to liquid products such as soups and dressings. Similarly, for dairy, looking at dairy protein ingredients, nutrition is a big factor, certainly in the fitness area, but also they provide aeration and foaming, binding and adhesion, the gelation, coagulation, emulsification, all the same properties pretty much that are available in using eggs. Now, one factor that has come up more and has become more important in recent years has been the issue of allergen labeling in foods, which is a result of the U.S. Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004. That this was based on the recognition that 8 major food allergens accounted for 90% of all food allergies. These are milk, eggs, fish, crustaceans, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. Now, all of these the presence of any of these ingredients in a food requires that their presence be so labeled on the front panel of a or be labeled on the panel of a food product. And pulses can play an important role in substituting for all of the ingredients that are indicated in red. So pulses can play a role in substituting for milk and eggs, the focus of this presentation, but also tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. Why are food allergens of concern and likely to stay of concern? Well, one big factor is kids. And the recognition that over time, looking at this graph that you see before you, the incidence of food allergies in children has been rising and is now estimated to affect somewhere between 4 and 5% of all children. The most important thing about this graph is that the incidence of food allergies or reported food allergies has been trending upwards. So this will likely remain a concern. Of course, with respect to our own presentation today, this is only a factor if you're able to replace 100% of all the egg or milk ingredient in a food product. Now, looking at the economics of egg and dairy ingredients, this is one area that should be of concern to all food product developers. If you develop a food product, you want to make sure that it stays affordable in years to come. If any single significant ingredient within that product is to increase significantly over time, it could threaten the position of that food product. Looking at raw material price trends for dried whole egg, milk, non-fat dry milk, and whey protein concentrate from the 10-year period between 2001 and 2010, what we find is significant fluctuations in price. These ingredients are not only expensive, but they show tremendous fluxes in price variation over time. Now, why is this occurring? There are a number of price drivers for these two ingredient category. One is global commodities demand. Um, Feed costs for chickens and for cows are a very major factor in the raw material cost of milk and eggs. Approximately 60 to 70% of milk and egg costs reflect the price of animal feed. Now, feed costs have been increasing because of exports. There have been huge increases in exports, especially to China, but also we're seeing significant exports to countries like Myanmar and to India, South Asia. Alfalfa, soy, and corn are all feeds for cows and chickens. Corn diversions to biofuels in the United States remain very high, and alfalfa remains vulnerable even today to drought conditions. Much of the alfalfa is grown in western states that are still exhibiting very dry conditions. Now, if we look at export demand at eggs, for example, the demand for whole egg export has been increasing over time, which puts more pressure on domestic sources. You can only grow flocks at a certain rate, and right now the egg industry is having to deal with a lot of environmental and humane animal treatment issues that have put pressure on their ability to expand flocks. We also have to deal with new products. The introduction of a very significant new product or new product category into the US market can have a very significant impact. For example, Mueller PepsiCo is building the joint venture between Mueller and PepsiCo to introduce the Mueller Greek yogurts. These yogurts, um, this company joint venture is right now building the world's largest yogurt plant in the state of New York, which is going to have a very major demand on existing milk prices. But Greek yogurt uses more milk to develop an end product than conventional yogurt did. So these types of product trends can have a major impact on the availability of milk as a raw material. With regard to eggs, the introduction of a single product such as McDonald's Egg White Delight McMuffin can put huge pressure on the price of egg albumin. Now, if we look at pulse ingredients as egg and dairy alternatives, this brings us to section 3 of this presentation. We're looking at economic benefits of using pulses. We'd like to talk about that. Pulses as egg and dairy alternatives and extenders. We like to talk about the functional properties of pulses and how that plays into their use as egg and dairy alternatives and extenders. And we'd like to talk about how to go about choosing egg and dairy alternatives and extenders, depending on the application. Looking at ingredient cost considerations. When we develop new products, the following ingredient variables tend to be of critical importance. The raw material price. Any of you that deal with a purchasing activity within your companies will know that this is what keeps them up at night. Raw material price volatility, and that is the future impact of ingredient price fluctuations on the viability of your new product in the marketplace. And then raw material availability. We've talked a bit about raw material availability already. So, looking at protein ingredient cost considerations, if we look at 10-year price trends for dried whole egg, dairy, and also pea ingredients, this is the graph that you saw before that shows the fluctuations of dairy and egg ingredients over time. These are the raw materials used for developing a lot of these dairy and egg ingredients. And how does that compare to pulses? Well, pulses, you'll see all the way at the bottom. We're using peas here. Peas are a major pulse raw material that is used in developing pulse based ingredients. But I'd like to emphasize that there's a lot of work being done with other pulses, such as lentils and chickpeas as well. So, peas we are using as a model to illustrate the benefits of using pulse ingredients, but they are not the only pulse ingredients that are available. If we look at the ingredient price of these ingredients on a per protein basis, look using numbers from 2010. If we look at ingredients such as dried whole egg powder, non-fat dry milk, and whole milk solids, a 50% whey protein concentrate, as compared to field peas, we see what their relative protein levels are in these various ingredients. If you go over to the second column, then we see that the dollars per kilogram of these ingredients And the dollars per kilogram of protein for egg and milk derived ingredients are considerably higher than what they are for field peas. At a dollar per kilogram of protein for field peas of 80 cents, we are um, at 20% less than the next highest source of protein, the next most expensive source of protein, I should say. If we look at ingredient price volatility for these raw materials, again, looking at the average price dollar per kilogram over a 10-year period for these ingredients, we find that peas, the average price of peas over this period at 16 cents per kilogram. We look at define the volatility as two standard deviations over and below the mean. We look at the volatility for these different ingredients. Looking at dried whole egg powder, we have a volatility of plus or minus $1.06 per kilogram, or about a third of the price of protein. The volatility goes up for non-fat dry milk, more than 50% of the average price per kilogram for milk, and so on down until we get to field peas. And if we look at field peas, we see that the volatility for field peas is measured in cents, whereas the volatility for others is in dollars. The meaning of this is that when you incorporate pulses into products, the price of pulses may go up or may go down, but the impact on the cost of the ingredients in your food product is going to be minimized. So, in conclusion, about cost considerations, pulse protein raw material costs are relatively low as compared to other protein sources such as milk and eggs. The price volatility should have relative low impact on finished food prices when using pulse based ingredients. Pulse proteins are commodity products produced in very high abundance and to very high quality standards in the United States. Now let's look at some of the functional benefits of pulses. The functional properties of pulses and the pulse components, which include the protein, the fiber and bran, and the starches, replicate many of the functional properties of egg and dairy proteins. If we look at egg and dairy protein functionality, these are some of the roles that egg and dairy proteins play in food products, uh, ranging from structure, strength, texture, mouthfeel, to agglomeration and adhesion. There are many different functions, of course, that they contribute depending on the product, but you'll look at pulse ingredients, they will produce many of those same functions. The key is to choose which ingredients with which to duplicate which functions. And that brings us to the fourth section of our presentation, and that is how to use pulse ingredients as egg and dairy alternatives and extenders in food formulation. Now, I'd like to provide you another reminder as to Ali McDaniel's email, just in case you did not manage to write that down before and you feel compelled to ask some questions after this webinar has been completed. In this section, we'll look at properties, we'll look at formulation, cost savings, and specific examples of products in which uh, pulse based ingredients have been used to replace egg or milk functionally. How to use pulses as egg and dairy alternatives and extenders. Well, let's go back to defining what the role is that is the roles of specific dairy and egg ingredients in different foods. Step one, we have to identify what are those functional properties that we want to duplicate using pulses. What is the role of dairy and egg ingredients in your product? Step two, we should determine what role pulses will play in your product. Are you looking to replace 100% of your egg and dairy ingredients? Are you looking for a partial egg and dairy replacer? Are you looking to extend the dairy and egg ingredients that you have in your product? And finally, are you looking simply to extend dairy and egg extenders that are already present in your product? Now that now that we've identified what it is that the eggs and um, dairy ingredients are contributing to our products, we have to determine which pulse components deliver the desired functional attributes. Starting with pea flour, whole pea flour, we look at about a 24% protein content. That protein will provide nutrition, it'll provide aeration and foaming, it will provide binding and adhesion and emulsification. The 45% starch component of pea flour will contribute gelation and coagulation, humectancy, thickening, and mouthfeel. We can also find insoluble fiber present at 10% that contributes to nutrition, humectancy, thickening, and mouthfeel, and as well as soluble fiber, which contributes gelation, coagulation, emulsification, humectancy, thickening, and mouthfeel. Now, if we look at bran ingredients, the bran is often separated from pea and other pulses. If we look at the bran ingredients of pea flour that are associated with peas, excuse me, then we're looking at an insoluble fiber content that shoots up to 84% and a soluble fiber that increases to 8%. So you're going to find very unique ingredient attributes just from looking at the bran of pulses. So, step four, what we want to do now is select those pulse ingredients that deliver the desired functional attributes. Let's start with cakes and cookies, for example. In cakes and cookies, dairy and egg ingredients contribute aeration and foaming, binding and adhesion, emulsification, gelation, and coagulation. While the pulse ingredients that provide these qualities include pulse flour, cooked pulse flour, pre-gelatinized pulse flour, pea protein concentrate, pea protein isolate, pulse starch, and pulse bran. That gives us quite a choice of ingredients from which to choose our egg and dairy replacement. However, in formulations, I can assure you that the degree of egg or dairy substitution that has been achieved using pulse based ingredients is 100%. And we'll show you a specific example of that later on. So, looking at the pulse ingredients that develop the desired functional attributes, if we're looking at battered and fried products, we're talking about egg washes that provide binding and adhesion, emulsification, gelation, and coagulation. You will find these properties present in pulse flour, cooked pulse flour, pre-gelled pulse flour, pea protein concentrate, pulse starch, and pulse bran. Again, in this application, you can substitute up to 100% of the egg or dairy ingredients with pulse-based ingredients. Let's look at another example, pasta. We spoke extensively about pasta in our last presentation, our last webinar presentation on gluten-free product development. But in pasta, eggs provide binding and adhesion, texture and mouthfeel, gelation, and coagulation. They are an important component to that desired al dente texture that is desired from pasta. But we also looked in pasta to make them robust to processing conditions, especially if the pasta is going to be retorted or if it's going to be frozen and then reheated. Uh, in this case, with pasta, we can use pulse flour, cooked pulse flour, pre-gelatinized pulse flour, pea protein concentrate, and pulse bran to duplicate many of these qualities. Again, 100% substitution of egg or dairy ingredients has been achieved successfully with these products. Now, looking at resources to which to go, we'd like to focus on one in particular, and that's the Northern Crops Institute. The Northern Crops Institute was extremely helpful to us in helping put together this information. They are affiliated with North Dakota State University, and I would highly recommend them as a go to resource with your own product development and food ingredient development needs. Two individuals in particular, I would recommend contacting Professor Cliff Hall. Many of you probably know him already, and also our good friend Nagy Jaredashashai, both of whom work very closely with pulses and their applications in foods. Using the first example, and this is now looking at information that has been developed um, at the Northern Crops Institute, looking at a white cake formula, looking at replacement of fresh whole egg in a white cake formula. You see that in this case, the fresh whole egg was replaced with pea protein at 6 grams, replacing and also adjusted to for the water that was present in the whole raw egg. This information, by the way, is from a poster that was presented at the most recent IFT. Looking at the white cakes that were presented are prepared from pea concentrates, pea isolates, and eggs. These are the cakes that were developed and their cross sections. The one on the left used pea protein concentrate. And I should point out, pea protein concentrate is only about 50% protein. The second one was using a freeze dried pea protein isolate developed at the Northern Crops Institute. The third one that you see here from the left is spray dried pea protein isolate, again developed at the Northern Crops Institute. And the final one using liquid egg. Looking back at the formula that was used for the white cake formula, um, they looked at the comparison of the pea protein isolate that was used in these formulations to egg albumin. And what you'll see is that the foaming capacity of pea protein isolate was very similar to that of egg albumin, although the foam stability was not as good. In fact, it wasn't very good at all as compared to foam egg albumin. Now, the foam stability can be strengthened using xanthan or pea starch. And by using let's say, a pea protein concentrate that does have starch in it, a lot of the functional properties of the egg albumin can be duplicated. Whereas the pea protein isolate has a weak foam stability, that foam stability can be enhanced using xanthan or pea starch. Sensory properties of white cake that were so formulated, and please uh, ignore the T gase. That is a separate evaluation that was done using transglutaminase. But if we look at the comparison of the different eggs in appearance, flavor, texture, and overall acceptability, we find that in the cases of overall acceptability and in appearance and texture, the product containing the pea protein isolate was actually favored. Now, looking at another example, using sugar snap cookies. In this case, in this series of tests, fresh egg, 23 grams in the formula provided, was replaced by pea protein and water. And the sensory properties of the sugar snap cookies so formulated showed that a very good quality cookie could be developed using pea protein isolate. The acceptability levels were very similar to those using egg, both in terms of overall acceptability and in appearance, especially, but also texture. Looking at a third example, pasta, and we presented some of this information in our last webinar. If we look at the level of pea flour incorporation into pasta from 0 to 20%, we find that the uh, cooking quality, the al dente cooking quality and weight and cooking loss was very, very good, and as well as was the firmness in pastas proportionate to increasing amounts of pea flour incorporation. If we look at the cooking quality by overcooking the pasta by 6 minutes, we find that we get a very good quality uh, pasta, again at higher levels of pea flour incorporation. So pasta al dente quality and robustness increased with increasing levels of pea flour incorporation in this standard pasta formula. However, you can also develop 100% legume pasta. For example, here is some pasta that was made with 100% chickpea and also 100% yellow pea in the formula. You'll see that there is an effect on color, but you can get a very good quality and a very attractive pasta by using straight um, pulse flour in the formulation. And here's a useful tip. This is based on a patent pending formula. So if you want to learn more about this or how to be able to use this, you can always contact me at Best Vantage. But the addition of 0.5% to 1% calcium sulfate will further increase the al dente texture and robustness of a pasta, significantly increase it. Looking at what role pulses should play, going back to our earlier options of, do you want a 100% egg and dairy replacer? Do you want a partial egg and dairy replacer? Do you want a dairy and egg extender? One area that's been of interest to us has been that the proliferation of egg replacers and extenders that are based largely on soluble fiber content. For example, three examples that we see in the marketplace here are three companies currently marketing egg replacers based on soluble dietary fiber. And we would like to suggest that you can significantly extend the effectiveness of ingredients such as this by combining them with pulse ingredients. Well, that brings us to our summary and conclusions. We'd also like to talk about resources that are available to you, questions and answers, and starting with summary and conclusions. One is that egg and dairy ingredients are high cost ingredients subject to high price volatility. Pulse ingredients, proteins, starches, fibers, and brands will duplicate many of the functional properties of egg and dairy ingredients. Pulse ingredients are likely to be lower cost and exhibit lower price volatility than dairy or egg derived ingredients. Pulse-based ingredients can function as egg and dairy replacers and also as extenders of egg and dairy replacers. And the primary applications that we see for pulses as egg or dairy extenders include bakery products, pasta, battered and fried products, meat binders, beverages, soups, sauces, and salad dressings, and extenders for other egg and dairy extenders. Resources that we'd encourage you to stay in touch with us, either through the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council. Here is Allie McDaniel's contact information. We highly recommend the Northern Crops Institute as an excellent resource when it comes to the use of pulses in foods. And finally, we at Best Vantage, located in the Chicago area, now please contact us if you're interested in doing more work in the area of pulses as food ingredients. There are many industry resources that belong to the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council. We strongly encourage you to contact these suppliers. Their contact information is presented here, but as I mentioned, this will soon be posted at the website of the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council at www.p-lentil.com. And here is where you will be able to find a copy of this webinar presentation. So www.p-lentil.com/webinars. And please stay in tune for upcoming webinars on more specific uses and applications. Our next one will become available in about 1 month, and we are still refining the topic. So at this point, I'd be very happy to entertain some questions from you, if you have any.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. I'm Joanne Colbert of Best Vantage Inc., and I'm filling in for Allie McDaniel. Dan, I've got a couple of questions, and tell me which one you want to address first. One is on price disparities, and the other one is on flavor issues.
In terms of whether they contribute flavors.
Okay. Are there negative flavor effects associated with using pulse ingredients?
Well, let me address that one first, Joanne. Yes, flavor can be an issue. And to go back to the beginning of the presentation, similar to soy ingredients, pulses contain lipoxidase enzymes. So it's very important that that enzyme activity be inactivated. Some of the suppliers will inactivate it as part of the process of transforming pulses into specific ingredients. Other suppliers will offer the raw ingredients, and the process that you would use in processing ingredients would then have to inactivate that lipoxidase enzyme activity. And the second question had to do with pricing.
Yeah, you had mentioned historical costs, but for price disparities, do you have any idea what the current price points are between different milk and egg ingredients compared to pulses?
Well, there's the price that you pay for eggs and milk will of course depend on the abilities of your purchasing department to secure favorable contracts. But just in reviewing where cost the prices of various products, representative ingredients, I should say, are now, we're finding egg albumin ranging in price from $4.50 to $8 per pound in the spot market. Whey protein concentrate 80% protein, whey protein concentrate in the $4 to $6 range. Pea protein isolate in the $2 to $2.50 range. Now, I should point out that right now supplies for pea protein isolate are tight because of very high demand. Um, Pea protein concentrates are more in the 70 to 80 cent per pound range, so significantly below what the price of either whey protein concentrate or egg albumin are at this time.
Well, those are the only two questions that I've had. Um,
Now, I have another question here. Is there a specific pulse for the replacement of egg or dairy, or is any pulse okay? That's a very good question because we focus so much of our attention in this presentation on pea ingredients. And that's just because so much of the work that we've referenced has been done with pea ingredients, and there's actually been a lot of development with pea ingredients. But there's a lot of work also being done with lentil and chickpea flours and starches and protein concentrates. So I really recommend that you contact the suppliers that we identified to get a full range of functional properties from different pulses. And yes, the source of the pulse that you choose will have an effect on flavor. Now, I have another question that talks about protein quality in terms of the amino acids, the amino acid compositions of various legumes. All I can say is that when you look at the overall quality of amino acids composition, uh, the composition of egg protein is going to be at the very top. And you can't beat the quality of egg albumin, for example, in terms of amino acid profile. Um, the amino acid profile of uh, dairy ingredients is going to be somewhat lower, but still very good. And I would have to say that if you want a one-to-one match of amino acid profile with between pulses and egg albumin, you're not going to get the exact profile. You're not going to get as good a profile, but you're going to get a very good profile, especially if it's combined with cereals, in which the profiles of pulses and cereals tend to be very complementary. Are there any other questions? I don't have any more questions here. Joanne, have you received any more?
no, I haven't.
Oh, I've got another question here. How may processing further affect the protein quality? We've asked that question. That question has been submitted to us before. Um, it really doesn't. The protein, the most probably abusive process that we've seen pulses and pulse-based ingredients subjected to is probably high pressure, high temperature extrusion. And we've looked into this, and the Northern Crops Institute has assured us that the quality of the protein is maintained. Thank you for your question, by the way. Are there any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, then it remains for me to thank you for participating in this webinar presentation. We're honored to have you in our audience, and I really encourage you to follow up with us if you do have any additional questions, and to stay posted for future webinars. There will be 2 more webinars on the use of pulses in food manufacturing and formulation um, this autumn, and we will keep you appraised of their titles as they are finalized. So thank you all, and at this point, I will sign off, and please look forward to the posting of this webinar at the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council website. So again, we'd like to thank the sponsor of this program, which is the funding entity, the Idaho State Department of Agriculture Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. And thank you all for your participation. And we hope that you all stay in touch with us, and we have the privilege of staying in touch with you. Thank you.
And please stay on for a short survey after we stop this webinar. Thanks again.